These super creepy abandoned places have been hiding evil secrets for decades. The Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, located in West Virginia, the Lunatic Asylum operated from 1864 to 1994. This hospital was designed to treat patients with innovative architectural features such as large windows and plenty of natural light. However, the hospital's history is marred by reports of patient mistreatment, neglect, and experimentation. Many patients were subjected to inhumane treatments, including lobotomies and other forms of torment. Today, the asylum is said to be haunted by the spirits of former patients, and paranormal investigators have captured evidence of unexplained phenomena. Now, in 2007, it was privately purchased and has become a museum/historic location and ghost hunting spot. It has a most unpleasant and dark history, and one person on Reddit actually shared their experience as a guide for the asylum. They wrote about their experience, basically saying that in 2001, I retired from my position as a guide and ghost hunt event manager under severe burnout. After all that I experienced there, it solidified in my mind that paranormal things that defy rational explanation do indeed happen, and certain phenomena are absolutely real. They went on to share a couple of strange things that they experienced in their time there. In their words, they said, "One evening while training for the job, I was on the first floor with a couple coworkers while everyone else was touring upstairs. We were just kind of killing time, quietly observing the area. Lights from outside was coming in through the windows, casting on the inner hall's wall. Now in that light, I watched the perfect silhouette of a man from head to toe walk through that light from left to right. I said something about it, and the three of us watched as an arm and hand moved into the light from the right side. I immediately ran into the room and began looking out the window for someone outside. There was no one there. At that time, the realization that from the ground to the bottom of the window is like 7 feet. It didn't even occur to me. I will never forget the crisp, clear silhouette shape for as long as I live. Spooky. This is one place I don't think I have any interest in visiting anytime soon." The Central State Hospital. In Indiana, the Central State Hospital was once a sprawling complex of buildings that housed thousands of patients. Now, the hospital was notorious for its overcrowding, poor conditions, and experimental treatments. One of the most disturbing practices was the use of lobotomies, which were performed on patients as young as 12 years old. The hospital's dark history has led to numerous reports of paranormal activity, including ghostly apparitions and unexplained noises. Now, the story begins after the Civil War at the Howard's Grove Freeman Hospital, created for or from a former Confederate hospital in 1868. Now, in 1882, a 300-acre farm called the Mayfield Farm in Dinwiddie County was purchased and upgraded to open as the new Central Lunatic Asylum. Over 400 patients were transferred from Howard's Grove to the new asylum, with over another 100 others on a wait list, basically. Now, the asylum was the only one to cater exclusively to African Americans in the entire state. In 1894, legislation was created to change the image of these hospitals, so the Central Lunatic Asylum became Central State Hospital, or just Central State. Now, politicians hoped the name change would evoke positive feelings towards these facilities, patients, and medical staff, but by the 1950s, the hospital had reached its maximum capacity with over 4,800 patients. Over 80 buildings on the campus and another 200 acres had been bought, so Central State Hospital was essentially a small city at this point. Spooky abandoned asylums are always haunted, right? Well, it seems like Central State is just no different. While there are no named ghosts, there are plenty of stories from patients and staff about objects moving, lights flickering, and shadow people running around campus. There are even stories from police officers who have seen and heard things. Moans, wails, screams, and cries are said to echo around the crumbling buildings in the dead of the night. Plants like ivy and trees grow up and through the abandoned buildings. It's a creepy sight to behold. There's a cemetery on the campus filled with nameless graves. Pripyat, Ukraine, the ghost town of Chernobyl. Now, Pripyat was once a thriving city built for workers of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. On April 26, 1986, reactor number 4 exploded, releasing radioactive material into the air. Now, the city was evacuated on April 27, 1986, one day after the Chernobyl disaster. disaster. The residents were told, it was just a precautionary evacuation. However, they never returned, and today nature is taking it back. Trees basically grow through apartments, schools still have toys and lesson plans frozen in time. Picture books, children's dolls, and hundreds of gas masks are among the personal items that are actually left behind in this ghost town, which paint a very, eerie picture of all that remains of a community that was once 50,000 people strong. But darker stories persist. Visitors report hearing disembodied voices, counters of spiking in empty rooms, and also the Black Bird of Chernobyl, which is said to be a winged creature that's said to have appeared before the explosion, possibly, a harbinger of demise. Now, the real horror, though, is the Soviet cover-up, the delay in evacuation, the silencing of whistleblowers. It wasn't just radiation that poisoned the people, but secrets. Urban explorer Adam Mark from Denbighshire in Wales, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, visited the exclusion zone just a few days ago and recorded new footage of the city, which appears to have been frozen in time. Now, haunting snaps include a nursery with rows of cots, mattresses, and dolls still eerily in place, whilst other photographers or other photographs show thousands of gas masks just lying abandoned on the floor, and the theme park rides, which are now being swallowed up by nature. Everyday objects such as toys, books, even medicine bottles can still be seen, as residents were told they would be able to return home in like 3 days. Yet, almost 40 years later, the Soviet town still lies completely abandoned. Adam actually said, you aren't supposed to go there at all because it's just so dangerous. The buildings are unstable and the floors are seriously dodgy. It was all pretty eerie and quite sad, really. But the most fascinating building for him was the morgue. There were untouched jars full of liquid in there, perfectly preserved. Now, the city remains abandoned today, a haunting reminder of the devastating consequences of human error. The city's abandoned buildings, schools, and hospitals are a testament to the lives that were disrupted and destroyed. Many believe that the city's radiation-contaminated environment has led to very strange and unexplained phenomena, including glowing anomalies and unexplained radiation readings. Poveglia Island in Venice, Italy, or better known as the gateway to hell. When it comes to this island, it's a little hard to tell what is true and what is made up, as many suspicions and tales surround the island. Poveglia comprises a group of 3 islands, with 2 being naturally formed and the 3rd resembling Venice through the use of wooden pillars and layers of earth. Now, one island is entirely vegetation, the other houses the main buildings, and finally the smallest is an octagon used as a small fort to protect the island and act as a fort before reaching Venice. Now, the island first welcomed inhabitants in the 7th century, and throughout the following years it grew into a peaceful little community that avoided invasions occurring on the mainland and other stuff. By avoiding the mainland, they also were lucky enough to avoid taxes, creating a very happy community, as you can imagine. They would often trade with nearby, people, just mostly avoided the Italian peninsula. Now, this tiny island in the Venetian lagoon is known as one of the most haunted places in the world. In the 1700s, it was used to quarantine plague victims, literally dumping grounds for the recently passed on. Now, later in the 20th century, it became a psychiatric hospital. According to legend, a doctor there experimented on patients performing crude lobotomies. He later threw himself, or was thrown, that's kind of unclear, off the hospital bell tower, claiming he was haunted by the souls that he tormented. You'll find Poveglia floating off the southwest end of Lido di Venezia. Now, today the island only hosts a few small buildings on the main island, which is entirely abandoned. It's now completely off limits to visitors, so you can't go. Fishermen avoid its waters, locals won't even sail near it. Historians estimate over 100,000 people passed away in Poveglia. Now, some say the soil is basically 50% human ash. At least that is one of the rumors floating around. Now, with all the victims of the plague, the hospital didn't know how to get rid of the bodies, so they just decided to burn them. This isn't just an abandoned island, it's a mass grave. It's tough to say which version of the story might be creepier, seeing the abandoned land and the destroyed structures. You can't help but feel the weight of the patients who live there and contemplate the sad stories of the island. New Amsterdam Theater. This is the ghost in green. Now, she appeared in the still of the night, a woman in a shimmering green beaded gown gliding across the floor into darkness. Now, she was blowing a kiss and vanishing through a wall. That's what a night guard claimed he saw in the long abandoned New Amsterdam Theater located in New York City. Now, the New Amsterdam Theater opened in 1903 as a Broadway jewel, but by the 1980s, it lay in ruins. Now, mushrooms grew on the walls, water flooded the floors, and the once golden ceilings rotted away and rusted. During restoration, in the 1990s, when the theater was nothing but a decaying shell, workers and guards began to see her, a glamorous figure carrying a small blue bottle. Many believe this is Olive Thomas, a Ziegfeld girl who passed away very tragically in Paris in 1920 after accidentally ingesting mercury bichloride. Now, the guard who reported her said she walked across the stage and actually just disappeared through a solid wall. When police searched, they found no one, but he quit days later because he was so terrified of the incident. Now, over the years, others have actually claimed to have seen her as well. Sometimes, curtains stir with no wind, footsteps are echoing through empty dressing rooms, and her figure appears in mirrors only to then vanish once approached. Now, the restoration uncovered hidden corridors, trap doors as well, and even bricked off rooms that were, long forgotten. Caretakers reported very cold spots in kind of, their old private duplex there where strange artifacts once sat. One said he actually heard chains rattling in a defunct elevator shaft, though that lift had been sealed decades earlier. Now, some staff believe Olive is playful, blowing kisses at actors and appearing during opening nights as if to bless or possibly curse a show. Bangor Opera House. Now, this is the firefighter and the little girl. Now, in Bangor, Maine, actors say they've seen a shadowy figure lurking in the balcony, even though no one should actually be there. Now, the Penobscot Theater Company, which operates out of the old Bangor Opera House site, is believed to actually be haunted by more than one restless spirit. Some allege maybe even as close to 10 or 20. The original opera house actually burned down to the ground in 1914, and legend actually has it and says that a firefighter passed away in that particular blaze. Now, his spirit is said to haunt the new building, pacing dark hallways at night and watching performances from the shadows. During one show, an actor actually said he noticed a figure in the upper balcony where no one was supposed to be seated at all, so that's spooky. Now, when they looked again after looking away, that spirit was then gone, of course. Now, backstage performers, tell of footsteps in empty hallways, doors locking and then unlocking on their own and being slammed shut, sinks turning the water on and off, and whispering voices calling out their names. One actress felt her costume kind of tug sharply, though she was alone in the dressing room. No one else was there, so who did it? Others have seen a young girl in a white dress wandering the corridors as well. Some actually describe her as transparent, gliding silently before fading away. Now, a group once said that they used a Ouija board in the theater and claimed they contacted both the firefighter and the little girl. The mix of protective and unsettling energy has left performers very uneasy. Some don't even want to be there. They say every time they step on stage, they actually wonder who's really watching them from the dark. Theatre Royal. This is in Drury Lane, and this is the story of the man in gray and the hidden bones. Now, during renovations back in the 1800s, skeletal remains were discovered bricked up inside a wall at London's Theatre Royal in Drury Lane. Now, ever since, actors and actresses and audiences alike have spoken of the man in gray, one of the most famous ghosts in theater history, period. Now, he appears as an 18th century nobleman in a powdered wig, a hat, a cloak, and he's walking usually from the upper circle to a royal box before just vanishing into the very wall where bones were found. Witnesses describe him carrying a sword, his face very pale but also very serious, and many performers consider him a bad omen. Now, seeing the man in gray is said to guarantee a production success also. It's a little contradicting there, but also chills even the bravest of actors, so they're scared. Drury Lane's hauntings don't stop there though. Charles Macklin, an actor who once unalived a fellow performer in an argument, is said to still wander backstage, reenacting kind of his guilt. Now, the ghost of Joseph Grimaldi, the father of modern clowning, is also reported to appear there as well, though usually kind of in a friendlier manner, which is good. Now, whispers follow staff in dark corridors, doors open and slam shut on their own, and actors just feel, sudden drops in temperature, as if someone invisible has kind of brushed past them. Now, the discovery of human remains sealed behind the wall only deepened the theater's haunted reputation, and to this day, few doubt that Drury Lane is a stage for the living and the deceased. Gaiety Theater, this is in Zeehan, Tasmania, and this is the story of the Wailing Woman. Now, in a decaying mining town in Tasmania stands the Gaiety Theater. Now, this is a crumbling giant, and it was once celebrated as a cultural hub and somewhere for people to go. Now, it's one of Australia's most haunted theaters ever. Locals whisper of a woman, though, who kind of wails through the night, echoing in the halls at all hours. Now, it was built in the late 1800s, and Gaiety once hosted grand performances, but it fell into ruin when the town's fortunes declined. Paranormal investigators who explore the site today report that, there's a lot of eerie phenomena, disembodied voices, moans are picked up on recording devices as well, footsteps crossing the stage, and just sudden blasts of icy air. So a lot of cold spots there. Now, one very chilling account tells of a director standing center stage when a heavy beam kind of cracked overhead. He felt a sudden shove pushing him backwards, and that was just in time to avoid being crushed, so maybe that spirit was looking out for him. Now, he insisted that something unseen, of course, saved him, and he credited that spirit to saving his life. Now, others describe a protective female energy spirit that scolds trespassers and warns them away from danger. The Wailing Woman is sometimes said to be a performer who actually allegedly passed away very tragically, or maybe a mother mourning a child lost in the mines, but some claim to see her kind of gliding through the theater at times, her cries piercing the silence, moving very slowly, and sometimes just disappearing out of nowhere. Theater tours often report malfunctioning electronics, drained camera batteries, and shadows darting across walls. So even hardened ghost hunters kind of leave this place shaken and don't really want to return. Orpheum Theater, this is in Memphis. Now, this is the ghost of Mary in Memphis, Tennessee. Now, the Orpheum Theater holds one of the most enduring ghost stories in all of America. This is the spirit of Mary, a 12-year-old girl. She's said to have passed away very tragically in the 1920s, and it's kind of debated, but she was either struck by a car or collapsed during one of her performances. It's unclear, and people kind of go back and forth on this one. But since then, her presence has been felt throughout the theater for years. Staff describe hearing a little girl's laughter, also, the patter of footsteps in empty corridors, soft voices calling from the balcony, some laughter, stuff, just whatever you'd imagine a little girl doing in a theater at that time. Mary has been spotted also sitting in the audience at times, waving at performers, or just kind of drifting through the wings, which is not only distracting for the performers, but, the audience as well. Now, some describe her as very mischievous, tugging on costumes, or humming softly during rehearsals. Paranormal investigators once recorded childlike giggles and actually saw very unusual energy kind of spike on their equipment, which is all kind of linked to Mary's balcony seat. Though she isn't considered a malevolent spirit, her sudden appearances unsettle even veteran actors and, goers, people that go watch performances. Stagehands claim to feel small little cold hands tugging at their clothes. Mirrors backstage usually reflect her fleeting figure, only for it to vanish when looked at directly, of course. Now, some say Mary is tied to a forgotten accident hidden in the theater's history, which was a secret that was never fully revealed. So, whether playful or tragic, her ghost has become a big part of the Orpheum's identity. Performers often say, that she's the theater's kind of permanent audience member, watching every single show from the shadows, refusing to leave, and maybe even cheering them on. Linda Vista Community Hospital, located in Los Angeles, California. Linda Vista Community Hospital is a former hospital located at 610 30 South Street, St. Louis Street in Los Angeles, California. Now, it's in the Boyle Heights neighborhood. The hospital was originally constructed for employees of the Santa Fe Railroad and called the Santa Fe Coastlines Hospital. Now, the hospital gained notoriety as one of America's most haunted hospitals, originally treating gang violence victims in the 1970s and 1980s. The hospital closed in 1991. After its closure, the hospital became a very popular filming location for productions, including films, TV shows, and music videos. It has also become the subject of several paranormal investigations. 2000s. Now, the hospital was sold in 2011 and converted into a low-income senior living facility called Hollenbach Terrace in 2015. Linda Vista Community Hospital is widely known for its alleged hauntings. Many visitors have reported hearing footsteps, moaning, and groaning even after the hospital was closed down. Some claim to have seen shadowy figures moving around the premises, especially in the emergency rooms. Now, a ghostly figure resembling a doctor pacing the corridors has been reported by some investigators, and a pacing young woman on the third floor, as well as the spirit of an orderly still making his rounds. Now, one person actually shared their story from a visit and said, "We were live streaming at 2:03 a.m. in the pediatric wing of Linda Vista when our camera picked up a shadow crawling along the ceiling. No footsteps, no noise, just this thing that kind of slithered like it had no bones. When we reviewed the footage later, we caught what looked like a face, red eyes, very sharp cheekbones, staring straight into the lens. None of us saw it in real time, but all 3 cameras did." That's terrifying. The Beelitz-Heilstätten Hospital in Brandenburg, Germany. Now, the Beelitz-Heilstätten Hospital, located near Berlin, is actually known for its eerie atmosphere in association with historical figures, aka the bad guys. While some claim it's haunted, others say the ghostly reputation actually stems from the abandoned state and the echoes of the past. Now, the hospital's history includes use as a sanatorium, a place for war officials, and later a Soviet army hospital. Now, Beelitz-Heilstätten was a large hospital complex with a very long history, including periods of a tuberculosis sanatorium and location for notable figures, and the building's abandoned state and the stories surrounding its past have contributed to a sense of unease and a claim of it just being haunted. Now, Beelitz has a reputation for its wild World War II era history and neurological experiments. Now, there's a local legend of a ghost named Schleicher von Beelitz, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, who is said to have roamed the halls in the late 90s as well as the early 2000s, deterring vandals and misbehaving kids. Now, this legend adds to the overall eerie atmosphere of the site. One person actually shared a story on Reddit and said, "What we caught on tape was something deeper. In the surgical ward, we heard knocking from behind sealed walls. The knocks turned into scratching, then into a very deep, growling voice that simply said, 'Belieb,' which is German for stay. So we left. The audio file, well, it got corrupted that night." That's creepy, right? I'm glad they didn't follow orders and they did decide to leave, because that's one thing you won't ever need me to do. I'll be gone faster than you can blink, so believe that. Now, some sections of the hospital are still used for neurological rehabilitation as well as Parkinson's research, and it has also been used as a film set for movies like The Pianist as well as Valkyrie. Now, visitors can access the site and there are tours available, so let me know if you ever visit. The Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum in Weston, West Virginia. Now, this National Historic Landmark served as a sanctuary for the mentally ill in the mid-1800s. This 160-year-old asylum holds very fascinating stories. It includes Civil War raids and also a gold robbery. There are also stories about the curative effects of architecture. Now, the efforts of determined individuals helped better the lives of the mentally ill. Now, the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, now widely considered one of the most haunted destinations in America, it actually operated from 1864 all the way to 1994. Although it was designed for 250 patients, about 2,400 were actually crammed in there, and they were treated very poorly. Now, ghost hunts of this massive building run year-round, and one person shared their experience there. He said when he visited for a tour, he expected to be joined by, hardcore paranormal investigators, kind of weighed down with camera gear and digital recorders, but it wasn't like that at all. He said, we broke into smaller groups, spending 2 hours on each of the asylum's 4 floors before rotating. Our tour guide told us about some of the hospital's better-known spirits, including a little girl named Lily who was born in the asylum, a man named Jesse who actually passed away of a heart attack in a bathtub, Civil War soldiers, as well as a patient who was kind of unalived brutally by his roommates. Now, he said the hospital is so vast that it was easy to end up alone despite, the the dozens of other people wandering around. It was also easy to feel lost amid the maze of hallways and patient rooms, covered in peeling paint. He said, "We were filming a kind of lights out challenge inside the women's ward." He said at 3:14 a.m., a camera set up in the hallway caught a figure walking backwards in complete silence. When we tried to enhance the image, its face blurred like static, but the eyes, pure black, stayed very clear. Now, paranormal experts later told them that what they saw was a shadow parasite. He continued to say by 4:30 a.m., he's like, "I was ready to go." He said, "As I drove away, I thought about whether I actually believed what I saw." He said, "I've always been fascinated by ghosts, but am I convinced they exist? Honestly, not sure." There's actually a lot of stories from this hospital, so search it up on Google if you're intrigued. The Rolling Hills Asylum in East Bethany, New York. Now, one of the most haunted locations in the whole of United States. It was established in 1827. The Rolling Hills Asylum, or the Genesee County Poorhouse, which was originally a working farm, soon became a refuge for some of society's less fortunate. So widows and orphans mingled with the mentally ill, and the unclaimed passed on were actually buried on the property. With over 1,700 documented demises and hundreds not recorded, it's no wonder, Haunted North America rated it as the second most haunted site in the United States. Often resembling a reformatory, a poorhouse often housed orphan children, families, destitute elderly, physically handicapped, mentally unstable, morally corrupt, even criminals. Now, these institutions were situated on the grounds of a poor farm on which, able-bodied residents were actually required to work. Such farms were, actually very common in the United States in the 19th and early 20th centuries. Now, a poorhouse was a government-run facility for the support and housing of dependent or just needy persons, typically run by a local government entity such as, a county or a municipality. Now, institutions of this nature were widespread in the United States prior to the adoption of the Social Security program in the 1930s. Residents were referred to as inmates, no matter, why they were housed there, and those physically able-bodied would have to work the farm, and many actually built and made wares to sell, to help offset some of their living expenses. Now, the raising of Holstein's pigs, draft horses, chickens, and ducks, raising vegetable and fruit crops, canning jams, jellies, meats, that was all part of their chores. One visitor shared their visitation story online and said, "I was standing in the solitary confinement corridor when a deafening scream erupted from the far end. The problem? Well, that hallway had caved in years ago, but the camera caught the scream echoing, bouncing unnaturally as if it came from inside our own equipment. The audio waveform even shows a second, much deeper voice overlapping the scream, like something was inside of her." Well, as creepy as that is, I bet some of you would still like to visit, am I right? Well, there's an upcoming event on June 4th. It's about 5 hours and it costs about $600. So if you've got the nerve, the time, and the money, check it out and thank me later. St. Mary's Church. Now, this is in Clopel Hill, England, and this is the desecrated parish. Now, hidden on a very lonely hill in Bedfordshire, the 14th century St. Mary's Church was abandoned in 1848 and it quickly fell into ruin, but its real story begins in 1963 when grave robbers broke into the churchyard and actually dug up a coffin, placing human bones inside the church in what appeared to be an occult ritual. Now, police described it as one of the worst cases of cemetery desecration the region had ever seen, and it honestly did not stop there. More graves were violated in 1969 and again in 1975, feeding all these rumors that the ruins were being used for satanic gatherings. Now, since then, locals have reported strange lights flickering around the church tower, hooded figures standing amongst the tombstones, and a very eerie coldness that kind of hangs over the site, even in the summer. I mean, it's one of the few abandoned churches in England where villagers openly warn visitors just not to go there after dark, because whatever moved in after the parish moved out, well, it still hasn't left. St. George's Church, this is in Lakova in the Czech Republic. Now, this is the ghost congregation. Deep in this very tiny village of Lakova stands a 14th century church, and it has a very tragic history. In 1968, during a funeral service, the roof just suddenly collapsed. I mean, it was out of nowhere. Now, luckily, taking the lives of no one, but terrifying the congregation enough that they actually just never returned ever. Now, for decades, the church just rotted, stripped of its furniture, and vandalized beyond recognition. But then in 2012, artist Jacob Hadrava installed more than 30 life-size plaster ghosts seated in the pews, which is really creepy when you think about it. Hooded figures draped in white cloth, and it's meant to represent the kind of Sudeten German parishioners expelled from the region after World War II. Now, since then, visitors swear that the statues actually shift. Sometimes they say they lean, and some people even say they tilt their heads between visits. Now, some claim they hear faint murmuring or even soft footsteps echoing behind them, even though the church is completely empty. Now, one tourist passed out after thinking one of the ghostly figures actually breathed on him. Now, whether it's just, the uncanny sculptures or the weight of the church's history, literally almost everyone who enters this church, they say the exact same thing. This place, it feels occupied. St. Étienne Church in France. Now, this is the church that refused to just go away quietly. St. Étienne-le-Vieux in Cayenne dates back to the 13th century, and honestly, it survived centuries of conflict until World War II. Now, during the Battle of Seine, a shell tore through the roof, and the once proud church was left gutted by fire and bomb damage. Now, instead of, rebuilding it, the city decided to actually leave the church abandoned as a war relic. But locals say something else stayed behind. Passersby have reported, hearing what sounds like chanting coming from inside, even though the church literally has no roof. Others have claimed to see a single light glowing in, kind of the dark of the night, despite there being no electricity in the ruin at all. Now, during restoration surveys, workers actually refused to go into the basement after hearing footsteps following them in the dark. So today, tourists stay, or they say standing inside the broken, nave of the church feels like being watched from above, almost as if the souls taken during the battle, maybe they never really left the sanctuary where they sought refuge. So if you ever go, let me know what you hear. The Holy Trinity Church, this is in Chirac region in Armenia. Now, this is the church that was lost to the earthquake. Now, in the village of Patskaven stands the remains of the 19th century Holy Trinity Church. This is a place that was, once the heart of the community. Now, in 1988, Armenia was struck by the catastrophic earthquake, destroying literally thousands of buildings, homes, lives, and it included this church. Its dome collapsed almost instantly, unaliving several villagers who had run inside for shelter. They thought it would be safe there. They thought this was a safe spot, but it wasn't. The site was abandoned and left exactly as it fell. Prayer books still half buried in the rubble, icons shattered on the floor, candles frozen mid-melt. Locals say the church is restless. Shepherds passing by report hearing sobbing coming from beneath the collapsed stonework, and some actually claim shadowy figures move along the broken walls at sunset. To this day, residents avoid it because, they say the church holds the spirits of those who passed away inside. And, they don't like to be disturbed, and I don't blame them. St. Paul's Presbyterian Church. Now, this is actually in Newfoundland, Canada, and they call it the church that still echoes. Now, on the coast of Newfoundland sits the abandoned St. Paul's Presbyterian Church. It was actually built in the early 1900s, and it was deserted after, the fishing community around it kind of just dwindled away. The church was left to the harsh Atlantic weather, windows shattered by storms, roofs eaten by salt winds, but locals say the building just never truly went silent. Fishermen claim they've heard the church bell ring kind of during heavy fog, even though the bell was actually removed all the way back in the 1970s. Some explorers report hearing, singing from inside, but the moment they step through the door, the entire building goes absolutely silent and quiet. Now, one group found every pew pushed to the side of the sanctuary as if someone or maybe something had made a path down the center aisle. Now, the church has no caretaker, no congregation, no official visitors, but sounds still echo inside it every single night. And no one can actually explain why. Churches like these were meant to hold peace, but instead, They hold memories, tragedies, and in some cases, something far, far darker. Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia, USA. This penitentiary is often described as a scary and haunted place, both for its dark history and reported paranormal activity. It's known for its creepy atmosphere and unsettling history of brutal punishments and solitary confinement. Many visitors and paranormal investigators have reported experiencing strange occurrences, including ghostly sightings, unexplained noises, and feelings of unease. Once the world's most expensive prison from 1829, this Philadelphia facility boasted grand architecture, modern luxuries, and notorious inmates, including Al Capone. One of the first penitentiaries ever built, it combined impressive design and strict discipline to inspire regret and reform in the hearts of convicts. It's also known for its harsh and often cruel treatments of inmates, including solitary confinement, physical punishments, their mad chair, and psychological torment. Since its closure in 1971, the complex has crumbled into a mass of deteriorating cell blocks, which are now recognized as a National Historic Landmark. Eastern State Penitentiary is open to visitors year-round, so go check it out if you want. Lee Plaza Hotel in Detroit, USA. A staggering 60% of the city's peak population has now moved away, leaving behind a living example of urban decay. Its vacant state and history contribute to its reputation for being eerie and potentially really scary. The formerly luxurious Lee Plaza Hotel stands windowless and exposed. It is just one of Detroit's many abandoned places that mark the shocking decline of a major American city. Once at the center of a booming motor industry, the successive blows of economic recessions, competition from overseas, and race riots chipped away at Detroit's early prosperity. Winchester Mystery House in California, USA. A number of employees and a few visitors claim to have crossed paths with Clyde, a mustached man sometimes seen pushing a wheelbarrow in the basement or trying to repair the fireplace in the ballroom. Then there are the gentle tugs of shirts or skirts during tours, and the report from longtime maintenance worker Denny. It's safe to say this place is really haunted. Although damaged in the 1906 earthquake, the house is open to visitors who can actually explore the 160 surviving rooms. Eccentric and extravagant, this Victorian mansion in California is a maze of dead ends, secret doorways, and stairs that lead literally nowhere. Driven by paranoia and superstition, Sarah Winchester, widow of William Winchester, began building in 1884 and ordered that construction should never cease. In the 38 years until her passing, the residence mushroomed into a labyrinth of architectural oddities, 7 stories high. Bodie Ghost Town in California, USA. Visitors and park rangers have reported seeing ghostly figures, hearing disembodied voices, and experiencing really other strange occurrences. Settled by prosecutors lured by the California gold rush in the mid-1800s, Bodie became a booming mining town of fortune-hungry men, saloon shootouts, and brawls. Now, its fortune was short-lived, however, and by the 1890s, gold strikes elsewhere had drawn the crowds away, causing the population to dwindle. Now, frozen in time, this ghost town became a national historical landmark in the 1960s. Now, tourists, not miners, flock here to walk the deserted streets and admire the town's arrested decline. Varosha, Cyprus. Now, an urban museum of corroding classic cars, destroyed high-rise hotels, and shop fronts boasting the latest in 1970s fashion for the deserted Varosha quarter in Famagusta City. Time froze in 1974. Now, following the Turkish invasion of Cyprus, Varosha's inhabitants were forced into a life of exile. Varosha has become a destination for very dark tourism, attracting visitors interested in exploring places with a somber or very tragic history, further contributing to its reputation as a place with a strong atmosphere. Once a favorite destination of the rich and the famous, people today can only peep through barbed wire as nature reclaims all of the buildings. Ryugyong Hotel in Pyongyang, now unoccupied, unopened, and never finished, and often called the Hotel of Doom or the Ghost Hotel due to its unfinished state and eerie appearance. This 105-story shell of the Ryugyong Hotel is a scar on Pyongyang's skyline and North Korea Korea's pride. Construction on the hotel began in 1987, but stopped after 5 years due to just a lack of funds. Once proudly, emblazoned across North Korean stamps, this vacant hotel soon became airbrushed out of official photos. The Ryugyong was intended to be a symbol of North Korea's strength and architectural, prowess. Its failure to materialize as a functioning hotel has made it a symbol of the country's economic struggles and isolation. The hotel's imposing presence and mysterious history have led to it being featured in numerous articles, documentaries, even online discussions, fueling speculation and contributing to its haunted aura. Now, despite nearly, 2 decades of abandonment, construction actually resumed in 2008, but whether the hotel will ever be completed is open to debate. San Juan, Michoacan in Mexico. Beginning in 1943, successive eruptions of the Paracutan volcano slowly engulfed houses, streets, and livelihoods, masking all signs of life under a black cloak of molten rock and ash, leaving behind ruins, particularly the church, partially buried in lava and ash. Now, defiantly protruding from a desolate landscape of ash and lava, this church tower is all that remains of the devastated village of San Juan. Now, this makes it a site of historical interest and a stark reminder of nature's power, attracting visitors who find it both awe-inspiring and melancholic. Now, today, tourists drawn to this isolated ruin can marvel at the still intact, though vacant, altar inside. Now, the desolate and surreal landscape, combined with the story of a town buried by a volcano, evokes a sense of just melancholy and wonder and a little bit of haunted. Kalyazin, Russia. Now, boldly rising 75 meters above the waterline, the bell tower of the flooded St. Nicholas Church marks the site where the Russian town of Kalyazin once stood. When the Ulik Reservoir was created in 1939, the town was, purposely flooded, and the landscape was irreplaceably altered. Now, attracted to the simplistic beauty of the remaining, landmark, tourists visiting on boats can actually explore this enduring landmark of the sunken town, although many believe it is cursed and haunted, so they stay away just to be safe. ZKP Tagansky in Moscow, Russia. Now, since its declassification in 1995, Bunker 42 has drawn many visitors keen to delve into the secrets of the past. Some people who have visited find the bunker's dark underground environment and historical context has created a sense of unease or even eeriness, and many people have claimed to have felt a very off-putting presence that they can't seem to explain. Hidden 60 meters below the streets of Moscow lies, the ZKP Tagansky, also known again as Bunker 42. Now, it is a former Soviet secret military facility in Moscow and a 7,000 square meter space which once served as a secret Cold War's era communication center. Now, built in the 1950s, this vast complex was designed to withstand a direct nuclear attack and filled with enough supplies to stay running for months afterwards. Presidio Modelo in Cuba. Presidio Modelo in Cuba is known for its very harsh history as a prison, particularly during its use in the 1950s. The prison, with its panopticon design, housed many political prisoners, including Fidel Castro and his brother Raul. Empty since 1967, this prison still radiates desperation and paranoia. Commissioned in 1926 by dictator Gerardo Machado and inspired, by this model, its oppressive architecture and designed to create a sense of constant invisible monitoring. Even though Fidel Castro was once an inmate here, under Castro's government, the prison's population ballooned to over 6,000 enemies of the state. Now, museum visitors can experience the forbidding atmosphere still present in these echoing corridors and vacant cells. Tale of a town swallowed by the earth, a place where the ground breathes smoke and whispers of a forgotten inferno. I speak of Centralia, Pennsylvania, a ghost town etched in the American landscape, not by war or famine, but by a relentless fire that has burned for over 6 decades. Imagine, if you will, a crisp spring day in the year 1962. Picture a small town, Main Street bustling, children playing, the scent of coal smoke mingling, with the aroma of sweet, sweet apple pie. Centralia then was a thriving coal town, but it was built upon the very resource that would become its curse. Beneath their feet, elaborate labyrinth of coal seems snaked through the earth, a fuel that has powered, industries and warmed homes for generations. But that day, something went terribly wrong. The precise origin remains a little shrouded in mystery, whispered theories of a trash fire, carelessly set by someone, or perhaps a controlled burn gone horribly wrong. Whatever the spark, it ignited a sleeping giant, a vein of coal deep within the earth. And once awakened, this beast proved unstoppable. At first, the signs were very subtle, a wisp of smoke kind of just curling from a crack in the road, a strange kind of sulfurous smell hanging in the air, but soon the cracks widened, steam hissed from, the fissures of the ground, and the temperature of the soil began to rise. Centralia was becoming a furnace. The flames, which were fueled by the endless supply of coal, spread like a wildfire beneath the town. Homes, buckled, foundations cracked, and gases seeped into basements, poisoning the air. The residents of Centralia, their lives intertwined with the coal that now threatened to consume them, were caught in a terrifying dilemma. Should they stay, clinging to their homes, or flee, abandoning everything they knew? Families were torn apart by this impossible choice. Businesses, shuttered, their windows, staring blankly into the smoky haze. The post office was then closed, a symbol of a community just slowly fading away. One by one, houses were swallowed by sinkholes, claimed by this relentless fire. This town was absolutely abandoned in the 1980s due to this coal mine fire that has been burning since the 1960s. Now, despite efforts to extinguish the fire, it continues to burn to this day, making Centralia unlivable and completely uninhabitable. Today, the town is an absolute ghost town, with many of its buildings and streets reclaimed by nature. I mean, Centralia stands, as a stark monument to the power of nature, a silent city kind of draped in a very eerie, perpetual fog. Route 61, once a major, thoroughfare, is now basically fully closed. It's like graffiti covered, and honestly, just a very chilling reminder of the town that once was. The air hangs very heavy with the smell of sulfur, which is also just a constant reminder of the fire that burns beneath. Centralia is not just an abandoned town, it's a living ghost. A place where the past refuses to be buried, a warning etched in smoke and ash. Many people want to visit, but it's not recommended, and it's still burning literally like right now. So even I will not recommend it. Like, this is the real Silent Hill, if you can catch that reference. Next up, a place frozen in time, a city cloaked in an eerie silence where the echoes of laughter and the hum of industry have been replaced by the rustling of wind through empty streets. I speak of Pripyat, Ukraine, a ghost city, a stark and haunting reminder of a tragedy that shook the world. Pripyat, once a vibrant, Soviet city, was built to house the workers of the nearby Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Now, imagine a city filled with youthful energy, a place where families strolled along, tree-lined boulevards, where children played in brightly colored parks, where the future seemed as bright as the utopian ideals, of the era. A city of nearly 50,000 people, just full of life, promise, and progress. But on April 26, 1986, that promise was shattered. A routine test at the Chernobyl plant, spiraled catastrophically out of control. Reactor number 4 exploded, unleashing a torrent of radiation into the atmosphere. The invisible enemy, absolutely silent, spread like a phantom wind, contaminating literally everything it touched. Within hours, Pripyat, the city of dreams, became a city of dread. The residents, initially unaware of the true danger, went about their daily lives, took their kids to school, went to the library, went to work, did their shopping, etc., oblivious to the invisible poison that was raining down on them. Then the order came, evacuation. A temporary measure, they were told, just for a few days. They packed what they could carry, leaving behind their homes, their belongings, their memories, believing they would soon return. But they never did. Pripyat became a ghost town, a chilling scene of life just interrupted. Time basically just stood still. Honestly, it's really creepy to look at. It's like a scene in a horror movie. Ferris wheels in the amusement park just remain frozen mid-turn, a very unsettling symbol of lost innocence. Dolls lie scattered in abandoned kindergartens, their eyes just staring into the emptiness, and books remain open on desks in deserted schools, juice boxes half drank. I'm really trying to paint you the picture here, but this city is a museum of a bygone era, a snapshot of just Soviet life preserved in a sepia-tone nightmare. The silence is deafening. No birds sing, no children laugh, only the wind whispers through the empty buildings, carrying with it the ghosts of the past. The once vibrant streets are now overgrown with weeds, a testament to nature's relentless reclaiming. screaming. It is a place where the past refuses to be forgotten, where the air itself seems to buzz with the weight of what happened. It is a place, that reminds us of the fragility of life, like the power of nature and the importance of vigilance. Now, many people want Pripyat to be a lesson, a reminder that progress must never come at the cost of human lives. Today, it's nothing more than a haunting reminder of the devastating consequences of the Chernobyl disaster. It's a ghost town, and honestly, to each their own, but I'd be way too spooked to visit. In 2022, Russian troops did actually roam through the deserted city and use the space to actually practice drills, as they used a special radiation control unit which monitored the levels to which the soldiers would be exposed. It's reported that this city has, some of the highest contamination levels. However, it is possible that over time the radiation levels could actually decrease so much that it makes it possible for people to live there again. Keep that in mind if you're looking to move or relocate in the next 50 years. Last up, we have a story of a forgotten island, a place once flooding with life, now a skeletal silhouette against the skyline. I speak of Hashima Island, also known as Battleship Island, a concrete ghost ship, adrift in the East China Sea. Imagine, if you will, a tiny island, barely larger than a city block, transformed into a fortress of industry. From the late 19th century until the mid-20th, Hashima was a coal mining powerhouse, a central figure in Japan's rapid industrialization. Mitsubishi Corporation, the island's owner, built towering concrete structures, apartment blocks, schools, shops, all crammed onto this little small rocky bluff. It was a city at sea, a self-contained world fueled by the very resource it extracted from the earth. Life on Hashima was a very unique and intense experience. Imagine, thousands of people living and working in such close proximity, a tightly knit community bound, by the shared purpose of coal extraction. Miners descended hundreds of meters below the surface, braving dangerous conditions to fuel Japan's growth. Families lived in cramped apartments, children played, on rooftop playgrounds, and the island throbbed with the energy of a boomtown. Hashima, at its peak in the 1950s, housed over 5,000 residents, making it one of the most densely populated, places on Earth. It was a symbol of Japan's resilience, its resourcefulness, and its relentless drive for progress. But this boom was not to last. The mid-20th century actually brought about a shift in energy sources. Coal, which was once king, was dethroned by the rise of oil. The mines on Hashima, once a source of wealth, became less profitable. Mitsubishi, facing declining returns, made the very difficult decision to just close the mines. And so in 1974, Hashima's fate was sealed. The residents who had built their lives on this island were forced to leave, abandoning their homes, their schools, basically their whole community. They left behind a city frozen in time, a concrete jungle slowly being reclaimed by the sea. Hashima became a ghost island, a haunting reminder of just a historic era. The once bustling apartment blocks now stand empty, their windows, staring blankly out at the ocean. The school where children once learned and laughed is now completely silent, its classrooms just filled with dust. The shops where families once bought their groceries are now just empty shelves, completely bare. The island, battered by typhoons and time, began to crumble. The structures, once symbols of strength and progress, became an eerie testament to the decay of human endeavors. Hashima, once a beacon of industry, became a symbol of decline, a constant reminder of the boom and bust cycle of human history. Now today, Hashima, stands as a somber and yet kind of beautiful ruin, a place that draws, photographers, urban explorers, and history enthusiasts from all around the world. It's a place where you can walk through the empty corridors of abandoned buildings, where you can feel the weight of history just hanging in the air, where you can imagine the lives of the people who once called this island home. Hashima is more than just an abandoned island, though. Honestly, it's a time capsule, a reminder of a specific moment in history. It's a story of industry, community, and ultimately abandonment. People want to remember Hashima for its story that deserves to be told, a story that deserves to be remembered. Tourists are allowed to visit if you want to go. However, fishermen who sail near the island claim they have seen strange flickering lights in the buildings, even though the island has no electricity. Strange noises have been heard as well, and cold spots have been felt. Many people have said that they had this sensation of being watched, and there are even claims of people that have been touched by unseen hands. There's something incredibly disturbing about a place built for joy, left to rot in silence. The bright colors fade, the laughter disappears, and all that's left is rust, wind, and the unsettling feeling that something is still there. Prepare yourself, because once you hear what happened in these parks, you will never look at roller coasters the same way again. Pripyat Amusement Park in Ukraine. Now, if there is one abandoned amusement park that feels like the world pressed pause right before disaster, it's the one in Pripyat. Now, the The infamous Ferris wheel was supposed to be open for the very first time the day after the Chernobyl nuclear explosion, but the city was evacuated in a panic and the rides never had a chance to spin. Today, the entire park stands exactly as it was left, Ferris wheel cabins frozen in midair, bumper cars still parked as if waiting for the next round, rust eating through everything. But the weird part isn't what you see, it's what you feel. Visitors describe an atmosphere that is unnervingly heavy. Sound doesn't travel normally here, almost like the air itself is thick. Some people report the distant sound of creaking metal when the Ferris wheel moves slightly in the wind. Others claim they've heard faint echoes that resemble children laughing, even though the city has been empty for almost 4 decades. Radiation monitors sometimes spike unexpectedly near the rides. Some explorers have sworn they saw a figure standing behind one of the bumper cars, or movement in the windows of nearby abandoned buildings, only for it to vanish the moment they tried to look directly at it. The park is more than abandoned. It feels like a memorial frozen in time, a place suspended in its final moment. Spree Park in Berlin, Germany. The Ferris wheel at Berlin's abandoned Spree Park doesn't just stand abandoned, it moves. When the wind is strong enough, the entire wheel slowly turns on its own, creaking loudly through the forest that's grown up around it. And that sound, that's exactly what draws ghost hunters and explorers from around the world. Spree Park opened in 1969 and was once packed with families, rides, food stands, even elaborate themed sections. After the Berlin Wall fell, things changed fast. The park hit financial trouble, went bankrupt, and even shut down. But the strange part came after. The former owner, in desperation, used old amusement rides to smuggle narcotics across borders. Yes, actual amusement rides stuffed with illegal cargo. That bizarre criminal twist added a very dark lore to an already eerie place. After the park closed, nature took over aggressively. Roller coaster tracks are now tangled in vines, paddle boats sit half buried in swampy water, and animatronic dinosaurs lie collapsed like ancient fossils. Explorers often describe hearing footsteps behind them or feeling watched from inside broken ride buildings. Some even claim to hear faint carnival music at night. Music the park hasn't played in decades, so Spree Park doesn't feel empty. It feels alert. Lake Shawnee Amusement Park in West Virginia. Now, before Lake Shawnee was an amusement park, the land was the site of a violent clash between settlers and the Shawnee tribe, a conflict that left several children deceased. When the park was built decades later, tragedy struck all over again. The people began wondering if the land itself was just cursed. From the 1920s to the 1960s, Lake Shawnee was a buzzing local attraction, but the demises didn't stop. A little girl in a pink dress passed away on the swing ride after a truck backed into it while she was still riding. 2 more children actually drowned in the park's swimming area. After multiple tragedies, the park shut down and people started asking questions. Today, the swing still stands and the Ferris wheel still towers above the trees, but the energy around them, completely unexplainable. Ghost hunters and investigators have called Lake Shawnee one of the most active paranormal sites in America. People report seeing a little girl in a pink dress near the swings. Some have captured EVPs of children laughing or crying. Others feel sudden cold patches of air even in the middle of summer. And some explorers say they feel like they're being followed. Every ride seems to have a story. Every inch of ground feels haunted by history and heartbreak. Holy Land USA in Connecticut. Now, this one isn't your typical amusement park. Holy Land USA was a massive biblical themed attraction built in the 1950s, complete with miniature cities, altars, statues, and recreations of stories from the Bible. It once drew crowds of over 40,000 people a year. But when the creator passed away in the 1980s, the park was left to rot. What once felt holy now feels unsettling in a way that's kind of hard to describe. Miniature stone villages lie crumbling under overgrown, vines. Statues of angels and prophets stand cracked, decayed, and leaning at unnatural angles. I mean, the giant cross overlooking the property casts a very long shadow across pathways no one has walked in decades. Locals say the place becomes, terrifying at night. Explorers have reported hearing footsteps on gravel when no one is there. Some claim to have heard whispering near broken down altars. A few describe the feeling of being watched constantly, especially when walking through the miniature Jerusalem ruins. The energy isn't chaotic like other parks. It's quiet, but very heavy. It feels like something sacred was disturbed, and whatever is left behind doesn't want company at all. An assassination occurred on the grounds in 2010, deepening the park's unsettling reputation. Some believe the land absorbed the violence and that it kind of stirred something dark. Okpo Land in South Korea. Okpo Land is the kind of urban legend that turned out to be real, and what happened there is the stuff of nightmares. In the 1990s, Okpo Land was a very colorful, family-friendly amusement park, but one ride became infamous, a duck-shaped roller coaster. Rumor says a young girl passed away after a cart derailed. Whether the exact details were covered up or distorted over time, the fact remains several accidents happened, and one of them involved a child. Instead of shutting the ride permanently, the park reportedly kept operating. That decision turned Okpo Land into a cautionary tale and a very haunting one. When the park finally closed in 1999, workers simply just walked away. They didn't pack up rides, they didn't store equipment, they didn't even remove the derailed cart where the accident happened. Everything was just left exactly as it was, frozen in a moment of terror. Explorers who visited before it was demolished described eerie children's laughter echoing through the empty park. Some claimed the duck ride still made squeaking noises at random times, and others felt watched by something they just could not explain. Even though the park was eventually torn down, the legend of Okpo Land refuses to pass on. I mean, people say the spirits of the children who lost their lives there still remain, and that the land itself carries the memory of tragedy. So these abandoned amusement parks aren't just rotting tourist destinations, they're time capsules of tragedy, sorrow, and unresolved stories. When we see a Ferris wheel frozen in place, or a rusting roller coaster, or swings rocking in the wind with no one near them, it becomes impossible not to feel something watching. These parks remind us that the line between joy and horror is razor thin. A place to design, or was designed to create laughter, can just as easily trap it, echo it, twist it into something very unsettling. And even though these parks are empty, they never truly feel alone.